Hey everyone, welcome back to Mimi Horror Stories. Tonight, we're bringing you another episode of spine-tingling horror tales set against the calming sound of rain to help you relax and drift off to sleep. So, get comfortable, hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm 15 years old. I live with my parents, who are always busy with work. Since I was young, I have been a lonely child, although I have friends at school and excel in my studies. I have always wanted to become a forensic doctor. I loved watching horror movies ever since I was little. One day, while browsing the internet, I stumbled upon the dark web. I found websites selling videos of real-life crimes, murders, and dissections, making huge amounts of money. The idea fascinated me, and I decided to make money this way. I started looking for people who could commit these crimes for money. I found a desperate person on the regular internet, someone who seemed in need of money. I told him I would give him $100,000 if he did what I asked. He agreed. I asked him to extract organs from a person while keeping the camera on so I could watch and guide him. After a month, he sent me a picture of a person and asked if this person was suitable. I said yes and told him to proceed so I could send the money. 2 days later, he called, saying he would drug the person that day. He called again after that, and I instructed him to turn on the camera. I hit the record button and guided him through the dissection process. After it was over, he asked when I would transfer the money. I told him that this was just the first task, and I would not transfer the money until he completed another job, promising a larger amount next time. He became angry and demanded the money, refusing to do another job until he received payment. We argued, and I hung up on him. I never contacted him again. Instead, I uploaded the recorded video to a dark website and made a lot of money. I was thrilled and started looking for other people to do the same thing, never paying them, but choosing victims from different countries. I sold these horrific videos on the dark web. One day, someone lured a child and dissected him while I recorded everything via phone. This person killed the child in his own home. When the child's family searched for him, they saw him on surveillance cameras entering the person's house. They went to the house and, overwhelmed by a foul odor, called the police. When the police arrived, they found the child's body and organs in a bag. They suspected it was organ trafficking, but found no medical equipment. Upon capturing the criminal, he confessed that someone had hired him to do this because he needed the money and had messages to prove it. When they tracked down the phone owner, they found a 15-year-old boy, me. I confessed to everything. Now, I feel deep regret as my life is over. My parents feel immense guilt for neglecting me, leading me to become a criminal. I was always cautious, or at least I thought I was, but one night, everything changed. It was late, and I had been out with friends, celebrating a promotion at work. I decided to take a shortcut through an alleyway I had used many times before. That was my first mistake. I don't remember much about the attack. It happened so quickly. One moment I was walking, the next I felt a sharp pain at the back of my head, and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was in a dimly lit room that smelled of antiseptic and something else I couldn't quite place. I tried to move, but my arms and legs were restrained. Panic set in. I struggled against the restraints, shouting for help, but there was no response. Hours, maybe even days, passed in a blur of fear and confusion. I was given food and water, but no explanations. Then one day, they came, men in surgical masks and scrubs. They didn't say a word as they prepared instruments, their faces obscured by masks and shadows. I begged them to let me go, promising anything and everything, but they remained silent. I felt a prick on my arm, and soon, the world started to fade again. The last thing I remember, before losing consciousness, was the cold, clinical look in their eyes. When I woke up, I was in a bathtub filled with ice. My body ached all over, and I felt an intense pain in my lower back. I looked down and saw a crude, stitched up incision on my side. It took a moment to process what had happened. My kidney was gone. They had taken it. I managed to pull myself out of the tub and stumble into the street, where a passerby saw me and called for help. I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors confirmed what I feared. I was the victim of an organ trafficking operation, likely orchestrated through the dark web. The police took my statement, but I knew the chances of finding the perpetrators were slim. They operate in the shadows, hidden behind layers of anonymity and encrypted networks. I was lucky to be alive, they said. Many others weren't as fortunate. The physical wounds healed, but the psychological scars remain. I still can't walk through that alleyway, or any dark place, without feeling a wave of terror. I lost more than just a kidney that night. I lost my sense of security, my trust in the world. And that, I fear, is something I'll never get back. I never expected that clicking on that link would lead me into a world of perpetual horror. It all started innocently enough curiosity sparked by tales of forbidden sights and hidden truths. Little did I know I was on the verge of descending into an endless nightmare. It began with a rumor circulating among tech-savvy friends, a rumor about a website known only as the Shadow Network. They spoke of it in hushed tones, as if uttering its name would summon something malevolent into our lives. With a mix of curiosity and misguided bravery, I fired up my browser one dark night. The site greeted me with a simple and stark interface, black background, a single chat window populated with faceless avatars, each more unsettling than the last. These were no ordinary chat rooms. They were labyrinths of corruption and darkness, where anonymity bred malevolence. People spoke in cryptic language, sharing stories of horror that seemed all too real to be mere fiction. I watched as a silent observer in this digital torment until one message caught my eye. It was a simple question: what are you willing to sacrifice for the truth? My curious and reckless nature, fueled by a false sense of heroism, led me through a door into my personal hell. Days turned into weeks as I delved deeper into the Shadow Network. Each night brought a new revelation, each click drawing me closer to a pit from which there seemed no escape. It appeared the users, if they could be called that, knew things about me, things I had never shared online. It was as if they could peer through the screen into my soul. Then came strange emails at unexpected hours, filled with vague warnings and encrypted threats. They knew my fears, my desires, my most mysterious secrets. Panic set in when I realized I was not in control. There was someone or something pulling the strings, orchestrating a symphony of terror where I was the unwitting maestro. I tried to disconnect, to sever ties with the Shadow Network, but it was futile. The more I resisted, the tighter their grip became. I had become entangled in a web of my own making, unable to break free. One fateful night, as I sat trembling before my flickering screen, a new message appeared before me. It was a video, high definition yet slightly distorted, but undeniably real. A looming figure emerged from the shadows outside my window, a silent presence speaking volumes without words. The accompanying message was chillingly simple: "We see you." That was the turning point. I knew then I had to fight back, reclaim my life from the darkness that had engulfed it. With the help of trusted allies, hackers who believed in justice more than concealment, we launched a counterattack. Together, we unraveled the web of deceit that ensnared me. We traced the digital breadcrumbs to their source, unmasking the faces behind the avatars. What we uncovered shook me to the core, a network of individuals thriving on fear and anonymity, preying on the innocent without remorse. But with every strand of the web we severed, doubts lingered on the horizon. On quiet evenings, I received a new message. This time, there were no videos or threats, just a picture of my place, my home, with a chilling message scrawled in an eerie script: "Shadows never die." When I glanced back at the window, I couldn't believe what I saw. The sun was on the brink of rising, its first rays slowly creeping into my room. The final message dissolved in the morning light, but the fear it left behind did not fade. My heart raced at an astonishing speed, my mind grappling between reality and nightmares. Were they really watching me? Was everything I did during those weeks fully exposed? There were no answers, just suspicion and creeping fear in every fiber of my being. As I gathered my courage to leave my room, I heard a strange noise behind me. I spun around quickly, but saw nothing. The room remained quiet, yet the doubt cast in my heart was a painful noise echoing in my ears. When I finally decided to leave the house, I found something horrific in the backyard. It was the lifeless body of my beloved dog, thrown on the ground. His neck was broken, his face bearing signs of torment. A note was pinned with a knife to his body, bearing cryptic words, "You've been betrayed." I couldn't bear the shock and sorrow. I went to the authorities, telling them everything from the shadow network to what happened to my dog. But doubts still haunt me, and I know I will never be safe again. Today, I live in constant fear. I don't know if there are eyes watching me now or if any of the things that happened are still happening. But nothing can erase the horrifying memories of those dark nights, nor can it bring back my innocent dog lost due to my cursed curiosity. This is my end, stuck between truth and fiction in a world I can't understand, nor escape from. I work as an accountant at a major tech company. My life was stable with a beloved wife and our 2 children, one 10 years old and the other 4. I never imagined that my peaceful life would be turned upside down while I was at my office working on my usual accounting tasks. Police officers burst in and arrested me. It was a shocking moment. My coworkers stared at me with wide eyes of shock and fear, and I couldn't understand what was happening. The officer yelled as he grabbed me, "You are under arrest for being part of a criminal gang." In my cold cell, the fear grew. Fear for my family, my wife and children, and my life, which had suddenly become a nightmare. I tried to contact my wife, but she was in shock. "What's happening?" she asked, her face filled with anxiety and confusion. The investigations began, and I discovered that my personal phone number had been used to communicate with members of a criminal gang. The evidence against me seemed overwhelming, and I had no explanation. I had never heard of the dark web before, and now I was being accused of crimes I didn't commit. While my wife tirelessly searched for evidence to prove my innocence, she started uncovering clues that suggested my personal information had been stolen and used on the dark web. My phone number was one of the pieces of evidence used to communicate with the criminal gang. This information was bought and sold like a commodity and was used to commit cybercrimes. In prison, I was subjected to scorn and threats from other inmates who believed I was a vile criminal. Each passing day was a new battle for survival. With each visit from my wife, my determination to keep fighting for the truth grew. My wife never gave up. She worked with private investigators and ethical hackers, trying to unravel the dark mystery. After years of research and investigation, she found irrefutable evidence proving I was the victim of a grand conspiracy. Despite this, the evidence was not accepted in court, and my appeal was denied. I was released from prison after 7 dark years. Upon my release, life was completely different. People around me looked at me with suspicion and doubt. Friends had turned into strangers, and neighbors avoided me. It was as if I carried a stain that could not be erased. My wife and our children were my only refuge, but they too bore the burden of people's harsh looks and words. Our children suffered at school because of their father's reputation. My wife often cried at night, wondering how to restore things to their rightful place and how we could rebuild our lives. After my release from prison, I decided I would not give up. I began searching for the evidence myself, with the help of some friends who believed in my innocence. I started digging deep into the internet, looking for threads that linked me to that gang. I knew my information had been stolen, and I had to prove it to the world. After months of continuous research, I found a website on the dark web that contained a massive database for selling stolen information. There were thousands of personal data entries, and among them was mine. This was the crucial moment. I gathered all the evidence and sent it to the authorities. It took a long time and a tremendous effort to convince the judicial system to review my case again. But after a year of struggle, the new evidence was accepted, and a retrial was granted. Eventually, my innocence was proven. The day of my exoneration felt like being born anew. I regained my freedom and dignity, but the wounds left by those years had not yet healed. Returning home, I found my children had grown up without me. My wife had been the backbone of the family, keeping hope and faith in my innocence. We shared moments of joy and recovery together, but they were always shadows, reminding me of the dark days I had lived through. Particularly the dark corners of the internet. One night, I found myself deep within a labyrinth of links, eventually landing on a dark web forum. It was filled with conspiracy theories, unsettling images, and cryptic discussions. One thread stood out: the human experiments. The post described bizarre and horrifying experiments conducted on volunteers, promising them large sums of money. It felt like reading a horror novel, but with a sickening undertone of reality. I decided to log off, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. The next day, an anonymous email appeared in my inbox. It contained a single line: "Do you want to see it for yourself?" Attached was a link. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I clicked the link, and it led me to a live stream. The screen was initially dark, but soon flickered to life. A woman was strapped to a metal table in a sterile, dimly lit room. Her eyes were wide with terror. Men in lab coats and masks surrounded her, their faces obscured. They spoke in low tones, and I couldn't make out their words. My heart pounded as I watched them prepare syringes and surgical instruments. One of the men turned to the camera and spoke directly. "Welcome to tonight's experiment. We will push the boundaries of human endurance and pain. Enjoy the show." Panic surged through me as I tried to close the window, but it wouldn't shut. It felt like the site had hijacked my computer. I was forced to watch as they injected the woman with various substances. Her screams were agonizing, filling my room with echoes of pain. They performed grotesque procedures, bringing her to the brink of death repeatedly. The ordeal lasted for hours, each second more horrific than the last. Finally, the screen went black, and a message appeared: "Thank you for watching. Next time, it could be you." A cold sweat drenched me as I shut down my computer. I tried to convince myself it was a sick prank, but that night, the nightmares began. Her face haunted me every time I closed my eyes. A few days later, another email arrived. This one contained photos of me, taken from outside my house. The message was clear: they were watching. I went to the police, but with no concrete evidence, they could do little. They advised me to change my routines and be vigilant. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and severed all old connections. But the fear never left. Every shadow, every unexpected noise, sent chills down my spine. I knew they were still out there, lurking in the shadows of the dark web, waiting for their next victim. The dark web isn't just a repository of horror stories and urban legends, it's a place where nightmares are crafted and lived. And I learned that in the most harrowing way possible. It all started with an innocuous message on Facebook. I had been chatting with an old acquaintance when the conversation took a strange turn. "Have you ever heard of the dark web?" he asked, his words tinged with curiosity and a hint of something darker. I replied, admitting my vague understanding but expressing no real interest. He insisted, claiming there was something I had to see, something that would change my perspective forever. Moments later, a link appeared in the chat. "Click this if you dare," he typed, followed by a winking emoji. Against my better judgment, I clicked the link. My screen went black for a moment before loading a site with the title The Hitman Forum. It was a place where hitmen advertised their services and users could place bounties on others. The homepage was filled with graphic images and videos of people being tortured and killed. My heart pounded as I watched the horrific scenes unfold. It felt too real to be a hoax, and a deep sense of dread settled in my stomach as I navigated through the site. I stumbled upon a live stream labeled current job, curiosity and fear battling within me. I clicked on the stream. The screen showed a dimly lit room where a person was bound to a chair, their face bruised and blooded. Shadowy figures moved around them, their identities obscured by masks. My pulse raced, and I could barely breathe. The live chat was filled with sickening comments and suggestions for how the captive should be tortured next. I couldn't take it anymore. I closed the browser and tried to calm myself down, but the images were seared into my mind. I knew I had to report what I had seen. Trembling, I called the police and explained everything. They took my statement seriously and assured me they would investigate. For a brief moment, I felt a glimmer of hope that this nightmare would end, but the next day, I received an email from an anonymous sender. The message was simple: "You're being watched." My heart sank as I realized the dark web had found me. Panic set in as I looked around my apartment, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The emails continued, becoming more threatening and personal. They referenced places I had been and things I had done, things no one else should know. It was clear that someone had been following me, watching my every move. One evening, while driving home, I noticed a black car following me. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, but as I made random turns and detours, the car stayed with me. My heart raced as I pulled into my driveway and hurried inside, locking all the doors behind me. The next email contained a photo of me taken just moments before I entered my house. The message read, "You're next." My blood ran cold. I realized that someone from the forum had put a hit out on me. Desperation took hold as I called the police again, but without concrete evidence, they couldn't do much to help. I knew I had to act quickly. I packed a bag with essentials and drove to a nearby hotel, hoping to lay low while I figured out my next move. Despite my best efforts to stay hidden, the feeling of being watched never left me. A few nights later, I was awoken by a noise outside my hotel room. Before I could react, the door burst open, and masked figures stormed in. They overpowered me, dragging me out of the room and into a waiting van. I struggled and screamed, but it was no use. They had me. When I awoke, I found myself in a dimly lit, dank room. The stench of mold and rot filled the air. I was bound to a chair, my wrists and ankles tightly secured. Panic surged through me as I realized where I was, the same room from the live stream. The door creaked open, and the masked figures entered. One of them set up a camera on a tripod, pointing it directly at me. My heart pounded as I understood what was about to happen. They were going to broadcast my torture live on the dark web. The room filled with eerie silence as the camera started rolling. The figures began their work, each act of violence met with cheers and suggestions from the live chat. The pain was unbearable, but the psychological torment was even worse. Knowing that faceless, anonymous viewers were reveling in my suffering was a special kind of horror. As the hours passed, the torture escalated. I begged for mercy, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. The chat voted on what should happen next, each decision more brutal than the last. I could feel my body giving up, the will to survive fading with every agonizing moment. Finally, they delivered the killing blow. My vision blurred, and darkness closed in. The last thing I heard was the sound of applause from the live chat, a chilling reminder of the evil that lurked in the shadows of the internet. The next morning, the police found my lifeless body. It all started with an innocent search for a children's toy. I was looking for a rare vintage doll for my niece's birthday. Browsing through various online marketplaces, I stumbled upon a forum link shared in the comments section of a collector's blog. The commenter claimed it led to a site with rare and unique toys. Intrigued, I clicked the link, which led me to a hidden part of the internet I had never ventured into before: the dark web. The site was called the Dark Playground. At first glance, it seemed like an innocent enough marketplace, albeit with an eerie, outdated design. The homepage featured an assortment of vintage toys, dolls, and other children's memorabilia. But as I delved deeper, I began to notice something unsettling. Among the listings were cryptic descriptions and disturbing images that didn't fit with the site's supposed theme. One particular listing caught my eye, the puppet show. The description was vague, promising a unique, interactive experience for viewers. Against my better judgment, I paid the small fee to gain access. My screen went black for a moment before a live stream began. The scene was set in a dimly lit room, decorated with old, tattered toys and children's drawings. At the center of the room was a stage with marionettes. A man in a mask stepped into view, addressing the camera in a distorted voice. "Welcome to the puppet show. Tonight's performance is special." As the show began, I realized with growing horror that the marionettes were not just puppets. They were children, bound and manipulated to mimic the movements of puppets. My stomach churned as I watched, paralyzed by the grotesque spectacle. The man in the mask moved the children with cruel precision, making them dance and perform in eerie silence. I wanted to turn it off, to look away, but my hands felt glued to the keyboard. I needed to do something, but I was terrified and unsure of how to proceed. The performance continued, each movement more horrifying than the last. I could see the fear in the children's eyes, their silent pleas for help. Desperate to stop the nightmare, I finally managed to close the browser. I sat in the darkness of my room, trying to process what I had just witnessed. I knew I had to report this to the authorities, but I was also terrified that whoever was behind the dark playground would come after me. It was a dark and stormy night when I first stumbled upon the game. I was browsing a forum known for its discussions on horror stories and urban legends. Someone had posted about a game on the dark web called the Game of Survival. They claimed it was a real-life horror game where participants were hunted by an unseen entity, and the only way to win was to survive the night. The idea was absurd, but the more I read, the more intrigued I became. The poster shared a link to the game's entrance, and against my better judgment, I clicked it. The site was simple, with a single button that said, "Enter the game." I hesitated, then pressed it. My screen went black for a moment before a message appeared. "Welcome to the Game of Survival. The rules are simple. Survive until dawn. Good luck." Suddenly, I received a text message on my phone. It was from an unknown number, and it contained a GPS location and a timer counting down from 8 hours. I realized with a jolt that the game was real, and I was now a participant. Panicking, I called my best friend and explained everything. They thought it was a prank, but I convinced them to come over. Together, we decided to drive to the location, hoping to figure out what was going on. The GPS led us to an old, abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. As we approached, my phone buzzed again. Another message. "The game has begun. Run." My heart pounded as we heard footsteps echoing through the warehouse. We ran, hiding in the shadows, trying to stay one step ahead of whatever was hunting us. The entity was relentless, a shadowy figure that seemed to melt into the darkness, always just a step behind. Hours passed in a blur of terror. We used every trick we could think of to evade the hunter, but it was always there, just out of sight. The timer on my phone kept ticking down, a constant reminder of our dwindling chances of survival. With only minutes left, we made a desperate dash for the exit. Just as we burst through the door, the sun began to rise, bathing the warehouse in light. The figure dissolved into the shadows, and the game was over. We had survived, but our relief was short-lived. As we drove home, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from the unknown number. "Congratulations, you survived, but the game never ends." My friend and I looked at each other in horror. The game had marked us, and we were never truly safe. Everywhere we went, we felt watched, hunted. The entity was always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next game to begin. My love for rare books led me to the dark web. It was said that the dark web held treasures untold for those who knew where to look, and I was in search of a particular book rumored to contain ancient, forbidden knowledge. It was called the Tome of Shadows, a book whispered about in occult circles. After weeks of searching, I found a link to an online bookstore hidden deep in the dark web. The site was called the Library of Shadows. It was an old, Gothic-style site, with a catalog of books that ranged from the mundane to the supernatural. And there it was, the Tome of Shadows, listed under the rare collections. I immediately placed an order, following the instructions for an anonymous transaction. The book arrived a week later, wrapped in brown paper and tied with a black ribbon. As I opened it, a chill ran down my spine. The pages were filled with cryptic symbols, dark rituals, and incantations in a language I couldn't decipher. That night, I decided to try one of the simpler rituals out of sheer curiosity. I followed the instructions, lighting candles and chanting the words phonetically. At first, nothing happened. Disappointed, I went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to find my room ice cold. Shadows moved in the corners, and a low, guttural whisper echoed around me. Panic set in as I realized I had unleashed something beyond my understanding. The shadows grew darker, coalescing into a figure at the foot of my bed. It spoke in a voice that resonated in my bones. "You have summoned me. What do you seek?" Terrified, I could barely speak. "I didn't mean to ... I was just curious ... The figure laughed, a sound that chilled my soul. "Curiosity comes with a price. Now, you must serve." Before I could react, the shadows engulfed me. I found myself in a vast, dark library, filled with books that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The figure was there, watching me. "This is your new home," it said. "You will guard these tomes and prevent others from making the same mistake you did." Years have passed, and I am still here, trapped in the Library of Shadows. I can never leave, and I am forced to watch as others, driven by their curiosity, fall into the same trap. My only solace is that I can warn them, but few listen, just as I didn't. The atmosphere in the library was oppressive. The walls seemed to close in on me, and every breath felt heavy with the weight of unseen eyes. The worst part was the whispers. They started softly, almost imperceptible, but grew louder with each passing day. They spoke in languages I didn't understand, but their tone was clear. They were angry, tormented souls. One night, while I was shelving a particularly old and dusty book, I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, accusing me of sins I had never committed. The spirits were relentless. They haunted my every step, their ghostly forms flickering in the dim light. They whispered my name, told me secrets of the afterlife that no living person should know. Their faces were contorted with pain, eyes hollow and empty. They were the souls of those who had been trapped here before me, bound to this cursed place by the same dark rituals. Sleep was impossible. Whenever I closed my eyes, they appeared, their ghastly faces inches from mine, their voices a cacophony of agony. They pulled at my clothes, scratched my skin, leaving marks that never faded. They showed me visions of their deaths, each more horrifying than the last. One particularly vengeful spirit took a special interest in me. It was a young girl, no older than 10, with long, dark hair and hollow eyes. She would appear at the end of dark hallways, her silhouette barely visible in the flickering candle light. She never spoke, but her presence was suffocating. She watched me, her gaze penetrating, as if she could see into my very soul. One night, as I tried to rest in a corner of the library, she appeared at my bedside. She reached out, her cold fingers brushing against my cheek. I couldn't move, paralyzed by fear. Her touch was icy, sending a chill through my entire body. She leaned in close, her breath cold against my ear, and whispered, "You cannot escape." Desperate, I tried to find a way out. I scoured the library for any hint of an exit, any spell that could break the curse. But every path led to dead ends. Every spellbook held only darker secrets. The library was a labyrinth, designed to keep me trapped forever. One day, I found a book hidden behind a false wall. It was different from the others, bound in a dark, leathery material that seemed to pulse under my fingers. It contained a single ritual, one that promised freedom, but at a terrible cost. The ritual required a human sacrifice, a life for a life. The spirits around me seemed to grow excited, their whispers becoming urgent. They wanted me to perform the ritual, to free myself and take my place among them. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. I couldn't condemn another soul to this eternal torment. As time passed, I began to lose hope. My body weakened, my mind frayed. The spirits became more aggressive, their attacks more vicious. They were hungry for release, and I was their only hope. The young girl, in particular, became a constant presence, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and rage. One fateful night, as the spirits closed in around me, I realized there was only one way to end the nightmare. I took the ancient tome and performed the ritual, not on another, but on myself. As the final words left my lips, the library seemed to collapse around me, the spirits' cries of relief mixing with my own screams of agony. The next morning, a new seeker of knowledge arrived at the Library of Shadows. The books were in perfect order, but the whispers had not ceased. They had only changed targets. And among the shadows, a new spirit watched over them, bound to the cursed place for eternity. I had always been fascinated by technology and the internet. As a software engineer, I felt confident navigating the online world, but there was one area I had never ventured into, the dark web. That changed one evening when a friend of mine, who is deeply into tech, started sharing stories about the dark web. The stories ranged from illegal activities to hidden forums and rare books. My curiosity was piqued. I decided to explore it myself, believing I could handle anything the internet threw at me. I installed the necessary browser and began my journey. I spent hours that night clicking through various sites, mostly finding forums and marketplaces. One site in particular caught my eye, a hacking forum called Shadownet. It was filled with discussions on various cyber activities, from ethical hacking to more sinister endeavors. I wasn't interested in the illegal stuff. I just wanted to see what people talked about. However, as I read through the threads, I noticed a post about a hacking challenge. The prize was a significant amount of cryptocurrency. The challenge seemed simple enough: crack a specific encrypted file within a week. Excited by the prospect of a challenge and the potential reward, I decided to give it a try. I spent the next few days obsessively working on the file, using all my skills and resources. Finally, I cracked it. Proud of my achievement, I posted my solution on the forum and waited for my prize. The next day, my laptop screen froze, then went black. When it restarted, a message appeared: "You've proven your skills. Welcome to the next level." Confused and slightly alarmed, I tried to close the browser, but it wouldn't respond. The message continued: "You are now part of Shadownet. There's no leaving." Panicking, I unplugged my laptop and decided to forget about the dark web. However, my troubles were just beginning. The following morning, I received an email from an unknown address. The subject line read, "Welcome to Shadownet." The email contained my personal details, address, phone number, and even private conversations. Frightened, I immediately contacted my tech-savvy friend, who suggested we meet at a local cafe. He examined my laptop and found a sophisticated malware embedded deep within the system. It was monitoring everything I did and had probably been installed when I participated in the hacking challenge. My friend helped me clean my laptop and advised me to change all my passwords and monitor my bank accounts. As a journalist, I've always been drawn to uncovering hidden truths, but this story was different. It started as a routine investigation into a series of missing persons linked to the dark web. What I discovered, though, was far more sinister than I could have imagined. One night, while delving deeper into the depths of the dark web, I stumbled upon a forum discussing the abduction of a young girl who had vanished from her hometown. The forum was filled with detailed posts about the crime, including horrifying photos and videos. It became clear that these weren't just casual observers, they were active participants in her kidnapping. I couldn't get the girl's face out of my mind. Her terrified eyes haunted me, driving me to dig deeper. I spent countless hours piecing together clues from the forum, trying to trace the origin of the posts and identify the culprits. The more I uncovered, the more I realized I was venturing into a dangerous underworld. As my investigation progressed, strange things began to happen. Unmarked cars started appearing near my home, and I received anonymous, threatening messages warning me to stop. My phone and computer were hacked repeatedly, and I felt a growing sense of dread. Every sound in my house seemed amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The constant knot of anxiety in my stomach was becoming unbearable. One evening, as I was working late in my office, I heard a noise outside. My heart pounded as I looked out the window and saw a shadowy figure standing by my car. Panic surged through me. They had found me. I knew I was being watched, and the fear was paralyzing. Desperate, I contacted a tech-savvy friend who helped me secure my devices and offered advice on how to protect myself online. Despite taking all possible precautions, the threats only escalated. The more I uncovered, the more intense and personal the threats became. My every move was being monitored, and I lived in constant fear that something terrible would happen. Then, one night, I received an email with a video attachment. My hands shook as I opened it. The video showed the young girl, bound and gagged, in a dark, dank room. Her eyes were wide with fear, and she was crying. The message was clear. If I didn't stop my investigation, they would kill her. The sheer terror in her eyes was a wake-up call. I felt a mixture of fear and determination. I couldn't abandon the girl now. I took all the evidence I had gathered to the authorities, pleading with them to act. Fortunately, they listened. A special task force was assembled, and they began a covert operation to rescue the girl and bring the criminals to justice. The waiting was excruciating, filled with sleepless nights and constant anxiety. Every moment felt like an eternity. Finally, after what felt like an endless wait, the police raided the location where the girl was being held. The scene they found was a nightmare come to life. The room was dark, the air thick with the stench of decay. She was lying on a filthy mattress, her wrists and ankles bound with rope. Her once bright eyes were now hollow and vacant, reflecting a deep, unimaginable suffering. The girl was emaciated, her skin pale and bruised. Her hair was matted and dirty, and she flinched at the slightest movement. The officers who found her described a child who had been stripped of her humanity, reduced to a state of utter despair. She was barely conscious, her body trembling with fear and weakness. The rescue team moved quickly, cutting her bonds and wrapping her in a blanket. She whimpered softly, too traumatized to comprehend that her ordeal was over. They rushed her to the hospital, where doctors immediately began treating her physical wounds. But it was clear that the psychological damage would take much longer to heal. When I visited her in the hospital, the sight of her shattered me. She lay in the bed, staring blankly at the ceiling. Her eyes, once filled with life, were now empty and distant. She barely spoke, and when she did, her voice was a faint, broken whisper. The horror she had endured had left deep, indelible scars on her soul.